Hello, everyone. Welcome back. The current FTX management has filed another lawsuit trying to claw back $1 billion for their customers. SafeMoon's CEO John Karony was just denied bail, which is very interesting. The reason is very interesting. This is actually a reversal of a previous judge's decision. So we're going to talk about why. We have a date set for the trial of Charlie Javice. If you don't know who that is, we're going to talk about it at the very end of this episode. It's another fraud case that I am very excited about. Some folks are probably familiar with. All right. My name is Carly Riley. For the past month plus, I've been covering the Sam Bankman-Fried trial. But of course, it is not over. Today is an update on the criminals, I guess. I don't know, keeping up with the crooks, I think is what I've been calling it in my own head. If you have been enjoying these episodes, if you've been watching, please do subscribe to the channel, like the videos, comment. If you're listening on podcast forum, subscribe to the podcast. I really appreciate everyone's support so much. And of course, a huge thank you to OpenSea, Web3 Cents, and Ledger, who are our sponsors for this show. I really appreciate that support. Let me introduce you to a brand new company that I could not be more excited about, Web3 Cents, a Web3 analytics platform that combines on-chain data with social media insights to give you the deepest, most meaningful intelligence into any NFT community. I have tested other analytics platforms out there, but Web3 Cents has the most comprehensive capabilities I've seen in the NFT ecosystem. They apply sophisticated data science to wallet histories to determine behavioral patterns and help shape predictive analytics. In other words, they can tell you which Twitter accounts are actually the influencers in your space. And they can tell you what resonates most within a community by looking at what other communities' token holders are involved in. The number of use cases here is virtually unlimited. So whether you're a trader, creator, institution, brand, agency, I promise Web3 Cents has data that you want to see with the deep and actionable insights that you need to build, analyze, grow, start, whatever you want to do within the NFT space and in terms of building a business and a community. Now, they are still in very early days, so they're eager to connect with the community. So if you're interested in learning more about what Web3 Cents can do for you and your business, and you should be, go and fill out the very short form linked to in the show notes, and someone from their team will reach out with more information and an opportunity for a product demo. Trust me, you won't regret it. All right, diving right in, our first update is with FTX and the FTX bankruptcy. By the way, the bankruptcy is a whole other universe that is worth getting into. I actually have a couple of calls scheduled for the next couple of days to understand what's happening with the bankruptcy proceedings a little bit more, because there's just questions. There's questions, folks, around all of that.
I need answers.
And I think we've been so focused on Sam Bankman-Fried, but frankly, there's a lot to be covered in terms of this whole bankruptcy proceeding. So we'll talk more about that on a future episode, hopefully next week. In the meantime, a new complaint was filed by FTX and its current management, currently being run by John Ray III. He's an attorney who somewhat famously shepherded Enron after their bankruptcy. They have filed a complaint against a Dubai-based cryptocurrency exchange called Bybit, as well as two essentially subsidiaries, affiliates of Bybit, something called Marana and something called Time Research, and then also some executives of those various entities whose names I'm not going to be able to pronounce well, so I'm not even going to try. This complaint is very similar to the one that we saw and the one that we've already talked about that was filed against Sam's parents. So in a past episode, I talked about this complaint against Joe Bankman and Barbara Fried, which is trying to claw back millions of dollars from them, saying basically they have these ill-gotten gains and that money is really owed to FTX and FTX customers.
Give it back! Give me back the money!
Similar complaint here, basically saying that Bybit, there's about $1 billion worth of money that Bybit received from FTX that they shouldn't have received, and now the current FTX management is trying to claw that back. So let's talk a little bit more about this. Apparently, Alameda Research was not the only FTX customer that had all sorts of special privileges on the exchange. Alameda had distinct special privileges that nobody else had, but Bybit apparently also had some special privileges. They were a big customer of FTX, and as a result, they had a certain kind of VIP white glove status. They had direct connection and relationships with a bunch of employees at FTX, and they used those relationships, as well as some other pieces of this, to strong arm FTX into allowing Bybit to withdraw hundreds of millions of dollars from the FTX exchange in November of 2022, even while all the rumors about FTX's insolvency were going around, even as other customers were unable to get their withdrawals processed, even as FTX ultimately halted all customer withdrawals.
Something wrong. The
bank won't give someone their money.
Bybit was still paid back, and Marana and some of these other companies that are named in this complaint were still able to withdraw their money, and they were prioritized over other customers. Now, one of the reasons for this, and I used the word strong arm, and that's because specifically FTX had assets on Bybit's exchange, on the Bybit exchange. And so one of the things that Bybit did was they basically said, we're going to freeze your assets, and you, FTX, won't be able to get your assets out until you release our assets from your exchange. They are still, according to this complaint, doing this, where apparently there is still $125 million of FTX assets frozen and locked up on Bybit. And Bybit is saying, we're not giving you any of that money back. We don't care that SBF is out of there. We don't care what else has gone on. We're not giving you that money back until you release about $20 million that is owed to, allegedly, to Marana, which, again, one of these subsidiaries connect the investment arm essentially of Bybit. Now, on the one hand, like I get it, right? If you have leverage and you can get your money back, sure, shoot your shot, right? Try and do it. On the other hand, that's not how this works. There's a whole process to this now, and customers need to be handled equally. Certain customers shouldn't get priority simply because they were rich enough or big enough or had personal friendships with the FTX employees or whatever the case may be.
You're not special because everyone is.
So, certainly I'm on the side of trying to get this money back from Bybit, but I also understand where Bybit's coming from in some of this. It's like, hey, we've now had this whole trial of Sam. We've had all these people plead guilty. We've all kind of universally accepted that this was customer money that belonged to us. So we're just asking for our money back. But there's a second piece to this that is also interesting and a bit shady. So another thing that Bybit wanted to do was they apparently wanted to, quote, unwind a trade that they had made with FTX prior to FTX's collapse, where FTX and Bybit had swapped tokens. So Bybit had its own token called BIT, B-I-T, and they had swapped it for a bunch of FTT, which we by now all know is FTX's token. And so as everything was imploding, apparently, or after, or at some point in this timeline, Bybit asked FTX to do a trade where basically Bybit wanted to send FTX like what was at that point valued at like $4 million worth of FTT in exchange for their like $125 million worth of BIT, which is obviously an absurd trade that FTX refused to do. And then after FTX refused this trade, BIT announced that there was this new token, Mantle, MNT, and that BIT was going to be going by the wayside, and that basically every BIT token could be exchanged 1-to-1 for an MNT token. And then when FTX started to try to convert their BIT tokens to MNT tokens, BIT allegedly, Bybit, the DAO actually that controlled the thing, froze the ability to do these conversions, and then proposed that they keep FTX out of this process, basically keep FTX from being able to exchange their BIT tokens for MNT tokens, thereby depriving them of this $125 million worth of BIT that they had, which is like a fucking aggressive move. Now, the way that this complaint reads, the complaint from FTX, it reads like this was all intentionally done, this spinning up Mantle, this converting BIT to Mantle, like that this whole thing was basically intentionally done as a way to screw FTX. I'm not sure that that's true. I know a little bit about Mantle. I mean, they're a broader ecosystem. They certainly have a lot of ambitions. And so I imagine that there was more to this than simply trying to like screw FTX out of being able to have their 125 million. So I think the complaint oversimplifies that, but I'm sure they saw it as gravy on top. And who knows, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this whole thing was just like one big conspiracy to make sure that FTX couldn't get any money from Bybit. But in any case, that is basically what is alleged in this complaint. And we'll see what happens from here. There hasn't been movement as far as I know, though, again, talking to folks over the next couple of days. Did I say that? I'm talking to some people who are more intimately familiar with the bankruptcy proceedings than I am. So I'm going to try and get more information on, are there any updates? Is there any movement on the suit that's been filed against the parents, for example? Because again, similar to what we're seeing having been filed against Bybit. All right. Update number 2 in keeping up with the crooks, keeping up with the criminals. I don't know. How do you want to call it? We've got a SafeMoon update, and this one was really interesting. I spoke about SafeMoon in a past episode. If you're not up to date on it, you can go check out that episode. CoffeeZilla has also done a ton of work on SafeMoon, and I highly recommend you check out his essentially series uncovering and bringing to light everything that SafeMoon has been doing. So John Karony, who is the CEO of SafeMoon ultimately, He and Thomas Smith, who was the CTO, have both been arrested. Kyle Nagy, who is the founder of SafeMoon, is, as far as we know, still at large. He has not been found by the authorities. Suspicions are that he may have gone abroad. Like, he's just a man on the run at this point. He's a fugitive. But Thomas Smith, John Karony, both have been found and arrested. And John Karony was initially permitted to be out on bond, I believe it was, which is distinct from bail, by a Utah judge. But that decision recently was just reversed. So you now have a New York City judge saying, no, he's not allowed out on bond. I want to talk about why. And he needs to be moved from Utah to a New York City jail. His trial will ultimately be in New York. So why did the judge reverse this decision? Well, first of all, he says that he thinks there's a high likelihood that John Karony is a flight risk, which I believe. I mean, again, you have Kyle Nagy already, who's a part of that team, who seems to have already fled. And then second, my understanding is that basically what John Karony had done was to use a house he owned in Utah as his bond. And he basically posted this house as his bond saying, I'll show up for court because if I don't, you can seize this asset of mine, this house of mine. But the point that prosecutors now made in this case to the judge was this house was potentially and perhaps likely bought with some of the ill-gotten gains, using that phrase for the second time today, the ill-gotten gains that he made off of SafeMoon. So there is a non-zero chance that this Utah house is going to be seized anyway, which John Karony may know, in which case that just heightens the idea that he's a flight risk, because if you bought a house with gains that you never should have had, so it's probably going to be seized as part of this trial or whatever, you're not actually incentivized to show up in court if the thing you've posted for bond is something you're likely going to lose anyway. So that was basically the argument made by the prosecution. The judge bought it, and so that is why the decision to let him out on bond was overturned. This strikes me as the right move. Certainly, I think this is correct. I will say I have a lot of empathy for people who lost money on SafeMoon or FTX or any of these. I just think it's really sad, honestly, and I know others have, there's varying degrees of sympathy that people have out there. I'm somebody who has a lot of sympathy for it. Our final story today is not a crypto-related story. This is the story of Charlie Javice, or Javice. I still don't know how you pronounce it. Some folks may be familiar with this story. This is a 30-year-old woman who sold her startup, her student loan startup, to JP Morgan for $175 million. Now, subsequently, JP Morgan has claimed that she defrauded them because they say the many millions of users she claimed she had, many of them were fake, that even the majority were fake, and that basically she had paid somebody to create fake profiles and fake users on her platform. The company was called Frank. And then she sold it to JP Morgan under the guise that these were all real users and they had bought it because they wanted all of these users. And it turned out not to be true, is what JP Morgan is alleging. So we now have a date for this trial. It is going to be next October. This is one I'm really looking forward to. Not fair to call Charlie Javice a crook yet because she has not been found guilty. I guess same could be said for John Karony, but I am more familiar with the John Karony case, so I feel more confident that he is guilty than I do about Charlie Javice. And one funny tidbit about this Charlie Javice situation is a judge had ruled that JP Morgan is obligated to pay her legal fees, I suppose, until she's found guilty, at which point I imagine she has to pay them again. I don't actually know. In any case, this is because of the way that the merger agreement was structured between Charlie and JP Morgan when JP bought out Frank, her company. And so they are covering her legal fees, and JP Morgan is claiming that she is essentially like gouging them. She apparently has 77 lawyers working on her case, and JP Morgan is like, this isn't like the bill we are paying for her defense is crazy and outrageous. I don't know what's going to come of that. Cry me a river. I mean, I don't care. This JP Morgan has to pay a bunch of money for this defense. It doesn't really bug me, but I do think it was kind of funny that those are the wars that are happening now before we get to trial in October. But Lord knows I will cover this case, or my plan is to cover this case when it comes out next year. And with that, folks, that is today's episode. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening. Like I said, if you are enjoying this episode, please do subscribe to the channel, like it, comment, all of the things. And let's hear it for our final two sponsors, OpenSea and Ledger. Y'all know the phrase, not your keys, not your crypto. Well, in a world where too many people have had to learn that the hard way, Overpriced JPEGs is proud to partner with Ledger, the world leader in critical digital asset security. Ledger's Nano S Plus and Nano X hardware wallets, paired with the Ledger Live app, Ledger's own software for setting up your Nano device and managing your crypto assets, is the easiest way to start your crypto journey while maintaining full control of your digital assets. You can use all your favorite dApps with Ledger Live, accessing 15 plus Web3 apps, including 1inch, Paraswap, Lido, and Zerion. So you can not only manage, but also grow your portfolio. And Ledger Live is available on mobile and desktop. Securing digital assets shouldn't be complicated. Ledger is as easy as it gets. Uncompromising security, effortless connectivity, full transparency, Ledger is your one-stop shop to trade and track crypto, grow your assets, and manage NFTs. Secure your future with Ledger. Visit shop.ledger.com today or check out the link in the show notes.